Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Two Nates on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons, and with me, as always, is Nathan Kwan. And first, start off with some MLB playoffs. Kwan, I think you're pretty excited about what's going on.
Yes, sir. First league championship series in 12 years for the Houston Astros as they beat the Boston Red Sox in 4 games. And they advanced to their first ever American League Championship Series. And they're playing the New York Yankees, who upset the Cleveland Indians. None of us that predicted that could happen, but they came back and they won in 5 games. And last night they played game 1 with the Astros winning 2-1 behind an outstanding pitching performance from Dallas Keuchel, who's absolutely owned the Yankees in his career, and he continued that last night. But I guess, Nathan, as an outsider, as a Rangers fan, I guess, what is your outlook on the rest of the series?
I mean, my outlook on the rest of the series is the Astros make it to the World Series. I mean, no offense to the Yankees, but I mean, it's a pretty big shock that they made it past the Cleveland Indians. I mean, a lot of that has to probably be due to the fact that the Indians were missing Edwin Encarnacion, and that really hampered them in all aspects. But that also being said, like, kudos to the Yankees for making it through. Aaron Judge pulling through as well. The rest of the young Bronx Bombers. But at the same time, too, there's just too much going on with the Astros for them to really keep pace. I mean, obviously you have Dallas Keuchel, who's been just phenomenal, and as you pointed out, has always been very good against the Yankees. But you also still have Justin Verlander coming up, and that bullpen has actually been pretty decent. But not only that, but they were able to be saved during that Boston Red Sox series because it only went 4 games, and on top of that too, their starters did not have to get pulled super quickly, except for that one time that Justin Verlander had to be put in. But that also being said, you also still have Jose Altuve, who's just been phenomenal again. I mean, he's someone that could possibly be ALCS MVP. He's so far, I'd say, the MVP of the playoffs after the first round. And then also you still have Carlos Correa, Alex Bregman. I'd say that this is more than likely a Houston Astros series victory. They still have 3 more wins to go, but I would say it's very likely that they do it. Especially since at the same time too, like as much as people like to say that, this Houston Astros team doesn't necessarily have as much playoff experience as you would like. I mean, you have to look at the Yankees, and the Yankees themselves don't have all that too. I mean, their young core that's been pushing them through, like their most important one's a rookie. Their second most important one is a rookie. Like, it's 2 young teams battling it out to show who's going to go through. And another funny thing to bring up is the fact that 5 years ago, I believe it was Sports Illustrated that put the Houston Astros on their cover, saying that they're going to be the 2017 World Series champions. And right now, as much as I dislike Sports Illustrated, I will say that they're looking very close to being right.
Wow, I like Sports Illustrated. Actually, I'm a longtime subscriber, but I'm also going to pick the Astros to win, but I think it's going to be really close. I think this might actually go the distance to 7 games. I look at New York, and I think that they have a better shot at the upset than the Red Sox did, just based on the way that they've been pitching lately. Masahiro Tanaka, who had a pretty terrible year, but Evan Tenenbaum mentioned in the last game he pitched in the regular season, he had 15 strikeouts, and he's continued that in his first 2 postseason games. And he was great last night. He was basically undone by Jose Altuve, who got an infield hit, stole second base, and then Tanaka gave up a hit to Carlos Correa, and that opened up the scoring. And then Yuli Gurriel ended up getting another RBI. But other than that, Tanaka was great. CC Sabathia had 2 good starts in the ALDS against the Indians. He's been good. Luis Severino had a terrible wildcard game, but he was good in game 4 of the Yankees win against the Indians. And then Sonny Gray's been kind of bad for them, but as a number 4 guy, there's a lot of talent there. So I think the Yankees definitely have a better starting pitching than the Red Sox did. And that's what I'm scared of, because if the Yankees starters can go deep into games and they can just bridge over to that bullpen with Dellin Betances and Aroldis Chapman at the back end, the Astros could struggle to score runs in this series. And I mean, these are 2 of the most high scoring teams in baseball throughout the regular season. And the Yankees were able to advance despite Aaron Judge having 1 hit in that division series. They got contributions from Brett Gardner and Greg Bird, Didi Gregorius. So it's really close. And in the end, I'm going to have to go with the Astros. I think the depth of the lineup is a little bit better with Jose Altuve playing out of his mind right now. He's hitting over 600 in the playoffs. Yuli Gurriel had an Astros record 8 hits in the first round, and Springer and Correa have made contributions as well. So I think there's a little bit better depth in the Astros lineup, but the pitching edge, I think, other than Keuchel, Verlander being 1-2, I think it has to go with the Yankees just because of their depth and their bullpen. Because the Astros bullpen, I said that was a key for the team on how well they would do this postseason. It's been okay. So Ken Giles has been pretty solid. He had a 2-inning save in the clincher in Boston. Last night, he got 5 outs to close out the game. But Chris Davinsky's been a little shaky. Joe Musgrove's a little bit shaky. Will Harris has been a little bit shaky. Francisco Liriano really shouldn't see the field. He gave up a 2-run homer to Rafael Devers in his only appearance in this postseason so far. So I think AJ Hinch has more concerns with the back end of his bullpen other than Giles just bridging the gap between the starters and the closer. The number 3 starter, interestingly enough, will be Charlie Morton, who started game 4 of the division series. So he bumps Brad Peacock. And so we'll see who starts game 4 and who will be available. They brought back Colin McHugh onto the roster. So they essentially have 6 starting pitchers on the roster. And they have basically 3 long guys in the bullpen with Lance McCullers, Colin McHugh, and Joe Musgrove, who's a former starter. So we'll see how Hinch manages the bullpen, how quick he is to pull a guy if he's not going well game 3 and 4. I'm going to go with the Astros in 7. I'm hoping that they get some runs off these Yankee starters who've been so good for them.
Absolutely. And on top of that, we should also note that the Astros ended up costing someone their job. John Farrell ended up getting fired from the Boston Red Sox as manager. And so now they're going to be on the lookout for a replacement.
Yeah, and I think that's a situation where, I mean, he's been great for them. They won World Series. They won the Division 3 out of the 5 years he's been there. But I think they have a new general manager in Dave Dombrowski there, and he wants his own guy. And John Farrell was hired by the previous regime.
But now let's move on to the NLCS. And I believe, Quan, you're the only one that got it perfect. So let's first start off with the longer series. The Cubs ended up beating out the Nationals, especially after Max Scherzer was unable to get the job done in Game 3. Scherzer ended up being outdueled by Jose Quintana, the midseason pickup for the Chicago Cubs. And then in Game 4, Steven Strasburg, with a heroic performance, staved off sickness and pitched a gem. And Chicago was completely stifled by him. But then comes Game 5, and unfortunately the Cubs win it out in a shootout, and Scherzer was unable to win it in relief.
Yeah, that was a wild series, and the level of starting pitching on both sides was absolutely crazy to watch. I mean, we were looking at the other series, and the starters were getting pulled early, but this one, it was all about the pitching and the clutch hitting, and the Nationals, they can't exercise those first-round demons that they've had, and some base running mistakes, some defensive miscues really cost them in the end in a series that was really, I mean, you can't have a slimmer margin than we had between those two teams.
But let's move on to the other series, which was far less close. The LA Dodgers swept the Arizona Diamondbacks. Yu Darvish was able to outduel Greinke, and he's been performing in the way that they've been hoping to since the Dodgers were able to get him at the deadline, and then the Dodgers knocked them out in the next game. So who do you think is going to win the upcoming series between the Dodgers and the Cubs?
Yeah, I think we're really lucky this year. I really think there's a great chance that both these league championship series will go the distance. You look on paper in the regular season, and I would say the Dodgers will win in 5, but the way the Cubs pitched in that first round against the Nationals was crazy. I mean, their starting pitching, which is really, it hasn't been that good throughout the regular season, but in postseason baseball, they just stepped up, and it started with Kyle Hendricks and John Lester. You mentioned Quintana, and then even Jake Arrieta was K for them. The one concern I have on the Cubs is the bullpen has not been as good for them. We saw Carl Edwards struggle a little bit. Mike Montgomery struggle a little bit. Wade Davis gave up a grand slam to Michael A. Taylor for the Nationals. So as far as the bullpens, I think the Dodgers have a bit of an edge with Kenley Jansen back there. He's just been really solid for them. And the Dodger lineup, we mentioned last week the depth of it, but they just destroyed the Arizona pitching in the first round with Justin Turner leading the way, Yasiel Puig, Logan Forsythe had 4 hits, Austin Barnes. It's just up and down. You're getting contributions. And in the end, I think it comes down to that lineup. The Cubs have just been struggling in that area, and you're not going to be able to score 2 and 3 runs and win. And then I think the Dodgers have a bit of a revenge factor as well. That series last year was really close, but the Cubs ended up pulling out in 6 games and getting to the World Series. I think this year with the Dodgers having the home field advantage and them having a long history that they're trying to change as well, I think they have a slightly better bullpen. Starting pitching is about even with Kershaw, Darvish, and Rich Hill for the Dodgers. I'll take LA in 7.
I think I'm going to do pull a Quan here, and I'm going to go with the Cubs. I think the experience and the factor here, and the fact that I think the Cubs might actually be in the Dodgers' heads at this point. Now, that being said, if there was ever a year for the Dodgers to get past them, it would be this year. But I think just the experience factor, as well as just the confidence that this Chicago Cubs team has, is going to be more than enough to get them past the Dodgers in what should be a really close series. I picked the Cubs in 7.
Yeah, I mean, no, regardless of which teams come out of each league, I think Major League Baseball has to be happy. The top 4 largest cities in the United States are represented in the league championship series of Houston, LA, New York, and Chicago. So either way, I mean, I'm sure Fox would like LA, New York more than anything, but good either way.
There's been so much made about MLB ratings, and like if there's been a year that there's really no excuse for like poor ratings, then this is the year. But we'll see once the Nielsen reports come out. So.
Yeah, so many storylines. I mean, again, LA has a long drought. The Cubs are the defending champs. The Yankees are so young, but they have their great history. And then the Astros have the Houston Strong backdrop.
As well as also being a young team, too.
Yeah, and a team that's never won it. So so many storylines, and it's going to be a worthy champion of baseball this year.
Absolutely. So let's now move on to the NFL. And the big news right now, even though they're on bye, the Cowboys have lost their running back for pretty much the majority of the season, with Zeke Baby finally getting suspended. I mean, this shouldn't have been a surprise, really. I mean, at this point, they were trying to fight tooth and nail to keep him on the field. And I mean, you look at how well the running game was while he was still playing, and you're just like, we delayed this for what exactly? And while it's not at all like a good thing that this is happening in terms of like on-field production, at the end of the day, like with everything that's come out with like Jerry and Ezekiel, you're just sort of like, you just want it to be over with. You're just sort of just tired of seeing all this stuff. In terms of like recapping last game, some questionable play calling towards the end really hurt the Cowboys. But at the end of the day, too, the defense is not very good, let's put it that way. I mean, they were definitely missing Sean Lee, and that was the reason why they were getting gashed left and right with the run defense, which was pretty much non-existent against a team that was starting a 5th-round pick in Aaron Jones, who, I mean, granted, I think Aaron Jones is a bit of a sleeper, but he shouldn't have been getting like over 100 yards and very easily getting like 5 yards per carry in his first start. That also being said, this team is struggling in the secondary with a lack of experience. This team is struggling with the linebacking core with a lack of experience, and this really falls at the feet of Jerry Jones. And then Jerry seems far more focused about his players standing for the national anthem than he is about actually winning football games. You know, like at this point, it's just like, you know, I mean, I know that there are things that are supposed to be more important than football, but I mean, I would say that like football is more important than whether or not the players that you employ and who are basically putting their bodies on the line for you, whether or not they decide to stand or kneel or sit or raise a fist during the national anthem, which, by the way, you kneeled for too, in order to show supposed solidarity with your players. It's annoying. It's annoying that you're doing this, especially after you signed wife beaters like Greg Hardy, or you draft people that have been in domestic violence situations like Ezekiel Elliott, who you, by the way, have been fighting for this entire time.
Do you think they make the playoffs at this point? I mean, the Eagles are 5-1, and they're running away with the East.
The Eagles are 5-1. I mean, like, I'm trying to think of who else is like competing for the wild card. I believe it's like Carolina and Detroit. I don't see them getting over it. I mean, that also being said, I think Dak Prescott does show this season that last season was not a fluke, and that he is someone that well deserving of the Rookie of the Year and is someone that's a franchise quarterback. I think he proves it this year, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be enough to get this team into the playoffs.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on and talk about the Houston Texans, and they are also 2-3 after they lost last Sunday night to the Kansas City Chiefs 42-34. The biggest takeaway from this game was the guys that they lost on the defensive side of the ball. J.J. Watt is going to be out for the rest of the season. I mean, we've talked about J.J. Watt and his decline in play this year. This is 3 straight years he's going to miss the rest of the season due to an injury, and I think the days of J.J. Watt being the Superman superstar on the defensive side of the ball are done, and he might actually legitimately be done for good at this point because he is 28 years old at this point, and it's really hard to come back from all those season-ending injuries with the same form that you had before. And I think it's really sad for him. And we mentioned it in the past with Andre Johnson, how the Texans really wasted the prime years of his career with just bad defenses, bad quarterback play. And I think J.J. Watt's going to go down as a Houston Texan with the same fate, where at his peak, he was the best defensive player in the league for a 3 to 4 year period. But during that time period, the Houston Texans accomplished absolutely nothing in terms of playoff and Super Bowl results because their offense was an absolute mess. And it's just the way the Houston Texans organization has been since they've been founded, and it's really sad. And JJ obviously will be a lifelong Houston Texan, Houston legend for the work he did in the Hurricane Harvey relief efforts, raising $38 million, but his time as a football superstar might be done. Also, the Texans lost Whitney Mercilus, their talented defensive end, probably their second best defensive player for the season as well. So that's defense, which was so good last year, number 1 ranked, is kind of a mess now. The Texans secondary has been a mess really this whole season. They were burned last week by Alex Smith, and now on the defensive line, they don't have the pass rushing depth that they had at the beginning of the year. It's just Devian Clowney and friends at this point, and the linebacking core is still solid. We've seen Zach Cunningham make an impact immediately, but I just don't see this defense being anywhere near what we hoped at the beginning of the year. And I mean, I think at this point they're just hoping that they can hang in there and maybe be a middle tier in the league. And I mean, there's so many bad offenses that I'm sure they'll have their good games, but to say that this defense is going to lead this team is not going to be the case at this point. And it comes at a time right when you're getting a elite tier starting quarterback, it seems, with Deshaun Watson, who had 5 touchdowns last week. He's grown so much week to week in learning this offense and making plays behind a very poor offensive line, but he's finding all his receivers and DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller and Bruce Ellington and the tight ends and Ryan Griffin. And the running game has benefited as well due to Deshaun Watson back there. I mean, defenses aren't having just to key up on the run, and it's opening up a little bit more lanes for Lamar Miller and Deontay Foreman, who's been good as a rookie. But yeah, this is again, the Houston Texans organization, when their defense has been really good, their offense has been terrible, and now it looks like they finally have a legitimate NFL offense. Their defense suffers all these injuries. And as far as this game upcoming against the Browns are obviously 0-5. They're a really bad football team, but they've been hurt by a lot of just bad turnovers. And if you look at the rankings, they're actually 5th overall in defense. They have a lot of talent on that side of the ball. They have so much talent in that, in fact, they released Joe Hayden, their top corner, for many years in the preseason. I think their secondary is really solid with Jamar Taylor. Jason McCourty is a longtime veteran, and Derek Kindred and Jabril Peppers as the safeties. They've been more than good. So I think this might be more of a running game for the Houston Texans against really talented Browns secondary. And the Browns also have a good pass rush, and Myles Garrett was their number 1 overall pick, and he had 2 sacks last week. Jamin Collins is a veteran on the defensive side of the ball as well. So I think the Texans, to be successful in the game, I think they're going to have to depend on the running game with Lamar Miller and Deontay Foreman. The Cleveland offense, meanwhile, they're starting Kevin Hogan in for their rookie quarterback, DeShone Kizer, this week. Kaiser turned the ball over like crazy last week. And so the Texans, I think this is a good opponent for them coming off a week in which they lost so many of their key guys to injuries, playing a bad Cleveland offense, a backup quarterback essentially, and Kevin Hogan. I think this is a good bounce back week. And really it's a crucial game that they have to win. Going into their bye week, they come out of the bye at Seattle, so that's a really tough game coming off. So I think they win. I think it's going to be a little bit closer and more uncomfortable than the team would hope for, but I'll take the Texans to win this one. Okay, so let's talk about college football briefly. So the University of Texas is playing Oklahoma today in the Red River rivalry. We're recording this on Saturday morning, so by the time you listen to it, that game will be over. But I fully expect Oklahoma to win the game. They're coming off a hideous performance last week at home against the Iowa State Cyclones, and Texas is coming off a really good win in double overtime against Kansas State. We went into that game thinking it would be more of a defensive struggle, with the Texas defense playing so well in back-to-back games against USC and Iowa State. And the Kansas State defense was just, at the beginning of the year, you could say it was the best defense in the Big 12, and you might still be able to say that. But it ended up being a shootout. I think I'm like most of Texas fans are just taking a wait-and-see approach with this team. I think week to week, we don't expect too much out of this team. Tom Herman has a lot of work to do in building this program up, and there's definitely flaws, but there's some bright spots. It looks like the quarterback controversy/battle might be over, as Sam Ehlinger had a pretty solid game last week. He bounced back from one early interception and really led a Texas offense that looked quite explosive at times against, again, a really good defense. On the other side of the ball, the defense did struggle more than I thought they would against Kansas State, which I know they play a lot of exotic looks and they have different formations. And Bill Snyder is just a heck of a football coach, and he always has his team prepared to play. But they did struggle a little bit. Also contributing to the game being extended for so long was the Texas kicker Joshua Rowland, who missed a pair of field goals in the fourth quarter, which would have ended it. I don't understand Texas not being able to recruit a kicker that has been any good since Justin Tucker left for the NFL, but that's another issue for another day. I mean, technically Texas is still undefeated in the Big 12. We'll see if they're still that after today's game in Dallas against Oklahoma. But again, week to week with this team, and we'll see where they are at the end of the year. Let's move on and talk about soccer. So this past week was an absolutely shocking result for the United States men's national team. Maybe you can say I jinxed it by basically declaring that they would qualify last week, but they ended up losing 2-1 in Trinidad and Tobago, a result that, coupled with Panama winning and Honduras winning, puts the United States on the outside looking in for the World Cup for the first time since 1986. My thoughts on this are, this is absolutely absurd. It's an embarrassment. The U.S. in this region of CONCACAF is in a position to dominate, and there should be no question about qualifying for the World Cup whatsoever. The fact that they struggled so much in this qualifying round against teams like Trinidad and Tobago, Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica. There's Houston Dynamo have 3 players from the Honduran national team. I'm not slighting any of those players whatsoever. But the United States, with the amount of money it has, the amount of people it has, the amount of resources that it has put into the soccer federation, for them to not qualify for the World Cup is a failure. And wholesale changes are absolutely needed top to bottom. Bruce Arena has already resigned, and if he wasn't going to resign, he was going to get fired. President Sunil Gulati needs to resign. I know he has an election coming up, and he's saying that he's going to keep running, and I hope he loses the election if it comes to that. But this soccer federation has absolutely failed us, and you need to make wholesale changes. They talked to Bruce Arena and Sunil Gulati after the game, and they said that no big changes needed to happen, and that we're not going to make anything drastic happen just because the ball went a couple inches wide of the post. Speaking about a shot in that U.S. Trinidad game that went wide, and if it had gone in, the U.S. would have qualified, and this would have been all okay. No, it's not okay. You should not be at this level. What have we built up? Let's look at South Africa. Got out of the group stage, went into the round of 16, played a really good Ghana team, and ended up losing. 4 years later, in that group of death with Ghana, with Portugal, with Germany, Nobody picked the United States to get out of that group, but Jurgen Klinsmann and that squad, they advanced to the knockout round, and they were overmatched against Belgium. There's no doubt about it. But they were in the game, and that's because of Tim Howard's excellence. And this next 4-year period was supposed to build on that success. And where is this U.S. team? Talent-wise, I've heard this over and over again. There's the most depth of talent to make the squad ever. But if that's the case, then what happened? They had absolutely no tactical continuity with this group. Bruce Arena seemed to just be pulling names out of a hat with who he wanted to start on any given qualification game. And the amount of veterans that were still on this team, DeMarcus Beasley, I love the guy. He's a Houston Dynamo, but he's 36 years old. There's no reason why he should have been the starting left back for so many of these qualifying games. Tim Howard, U.S. legend, he'll always have that Belgium game, but he should not be the starting goalkeeper. Jeff Cameron, former Dynamo, love the guy, but he's not, at this point, a world-class center back, and he never will be. Michael Bradley, same thing. Great U.S. midfielder, maybe one of the best holding midfielder we've ever had. Not good enough at this point. Josie Altidore, same thing. The talent is lacking, and that's a result of the structure of U.S. soccer, and they need to tear it all apart, and they need to build from the ground up. There needs to be a better player development program. There needs to be better coaching from the youth level up to through high school, and when these players hit their lower 20s. This team can't afford to not qualify for the Olympics, which they've had the last 2 cycles, and the World Cup. It's inexcusable. There's smaller countries around the world that have put together a 10-year plan, and it has launched them into success. Look at what Germany did. In 2000, they bottomed out, and then 10 years later, they're winning the World Cup. Iceland, a country that has a population of Corpus Christi, Texas, and they qualified for Euro 2016, and now they're the smallest ever country in the World Cup with their player development. U.S. soccer is a money-making machine. That's what the people in charge have done. That's what Sunil Gulati has been very successful with the tournaments he's run, but the emphasis needs to be on player development. You can't just keep hoping for success stories like a Christian Pulisic, a Landon Donovan, just come out of nowhere and you get lucky and you get a really good soccer player. That's not a track to be successful in the long run. There's not enough of those to make an 11-man squad. And until they completely get their heads out of their butt and realize that what they've been doing has not worked and it will not work in the future. I'm just sick of the excuses at this point. Bruce Arena saying that dares any European team to come over and play on the types of pitches that they have to do in CONCACAF. The refereeing, the fan support. Stop with the excuses. Take accountability. Good teams, good programs, good players, good coaching, good federations, they don't make excuses. They just get the results done. And the fact that there's this sort of arrogance within U.S. soccer where they think that they're better than they are. The United States has accomplished jack on the world stage in soccer. And those players, they don't get the criticism, and when they do get the criticism, they think that people are just hating on them. No, you're getting criticism because people care about soccer in this country. And this team, this federation, this group of people in charge of United States soccer has destroyed all the momentum that was built up over the past 20 years. And now there's going to be little kids next summer when the World Cup is playing. They're not going to be watching because the United States is not in it. And that's a lost opportunity for the next generation of kids. And that's just sad.
Bruce Arena's gone. Unfortunately, it's a year too late. It's unfortunate to see it considering the talent that they did have on this team, whether you want to agree with it or not. This team did have enough talent to at least make the World Cup, let alone at least be somewhat competitive in the group stage. But that being said, I mean, going forward, they have at least a budding superstar in Christian Pulisic, and so they're going to have to build the team around him.
Yeah, but he needs help, and we'll see if that help comes in terms of young stars. I mean, Kellen Acosta is one as well, that for FC Dallas, and Darlington Nagbe. And there's more people in the pipeline, like the U.S. under-20 team is doing well at the World Cup for them, but they just need more changes than just hoping that the next group of stars develops. But let's talk about MLS briefly. There's only 2 weeks left in the regular season before the playoffs, and both FC Dallas and Houston Dynamo are still in it. FC Dallas has kind of 50-50 shot at this point. They're sitting in 6th right now. They're 1 point ahead of both San Jose and Real Salt Lake, which is the good news. Last week they had a poor result in Colorado, only tied them 1-1. They lead the league in ties, which the only reason that is significant is because FC Dallas would lose both a tiebreaker to San Jose and Real Salt Lake if they end up tied when the regular season ends, and that's because MLS has this wins tiebreaker and FC Dallas has 10 wins while those two teams have 12 wins. And so their 2 matches remaining are at Seattle Sunday night, and then they host LA next week. So that's 1 game against a playoff team in Seattle, which is fighting for position and maybe home field, and then LA, which is a terrible team, and they are going into the offseason at this point already. The 2 teams that are fighting, RSL also has that same scenario where they have 1 game against a bad team at Colorado on Sunday, and then they host Seattle next week. San Jose has the same situation as well. They play a good team at Vancouver and then a bad team against Minnesota. So we'll see how it turns out. The Dynamo are sitting 4 points clear right now. They got a 2-1 win against Kansas City on Wednesday night, beating them on an own goal. So thank you, Flocker Gods and Eric Palmer Brown, with that own goal. Tomas Martinez also looked good, and he had the goal for the Dynamo. But they play at Kansas City on Sunday night, and then they host Chicago on Decision Day, the final day of the regular season. They need 1 more result, at least 1 more point to make the playoffs kind of a certainty. I think there's a possibility that they could even get up and get home field in the knockout round if they were able to get a win and a draw in their final 2 matches. But we shall see as the final days of MLS regular season come to a close. Let's move on to shoutouts, and let's first shout out the NHL and the Dallas Stars getting a win, their first of the season against the Detroit Red Wings on Tuesday night, beating them 4-2. They did lose to Nashville 4-1 on Thursday, and they lost to St. Louis 4-2 last Saturday. So kind of a struggle start for the Stars at the beginning of this year. Also, shout out to Evan Tenenbaum's sister, who completed the Chicago Marathon on Sunday. It's her 2nd one, and she said she's finished for good. So shout out to her. And finally, shout out to Stuart Holden, former Houston Dynamo and USMNT national team player. He is hosting an event called Kick In for Houston. It's a celebrity soccer match benefiting the victims of Hurricane Harvey. It's going to be November 18th at 6 p.m. at BBVA Compass Stadium. It's going to be televised by FS1. And they have some big-name celebrities coming. Alex Morgan, Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey, also Steve Nash, former NBA star, Josie Altidore, Mia Hamm, and Jermaine Jones, Brian Ching, Taylor Twellman, and the most interesting name I saw on the list was Roger Clemens, so the former pitcher. He's in his 50s now. He's going to try to kick a soccer ball around. Shout out to Stuart Holden for organizing that event, and hopefully it raises a lot of money for the victims of Hurricane Harvey. But also, I want you guys to check out our NBA preview podcast. It's going to be released on Tuesday morning. The start of the NBA season is on Tuesday night, and so we asked Kevin Hahn to come on and break down a lot of the contenders as far as the Houston Rockets as well as the Dallas Mavericks and his thoughts on the upcoming NBA season, and we give our predictions. So check that out. It's going to be released Tuesday morning. And I want you guys to visit our website, TwoNatesOnSports.com. Also like us on Facebook at TwoNatesOnSports. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, where you'll get a notification as soon as we release our new episodes. You can also send us any comments and suggestions to our email at TwoNatesOnSports@gmail.com. We'll talk to you guys next week.